In this video, we're going to focus on how we can create a scroll effect here. So I'm on the canvas, and when I hover on the canvas and I start to scroll with my mouse wheel up, you can see here I'm moving to the very end. And if I scroll back or scroll down, you see here I'm going again to the very start here, which is a value of 50. And you can so play around to the left and the right. So let's start to explore how to do this scroll effect. So let's start to look how to scroll through chart data in Chart.js. So the first thing what we need is we need to get a default code, which you can find here on chartjs3.com getting started. And this link is also in the description box. Scroll down and then just copy this entire chunk of code once you're on the site. And if you would like to understand what this code all does, there is a video, this video here above, that explains it all. So once you have all the code, paste it all in there. Cut that title out, or at least for me, and I will just put that in there, save this and refresh. Alright, so now we have this wonderful chart here, which is a bar chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the amount of data in here quickly. So I'm just going to grab these labels, paste, then a comma, paste, then comma, paste, comma, paste, comma, paste. Doesn't matter how many you put in there, 3-4 times is fine. Then I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste that in there as well. There we are. So once we save this, I guess we can do one more time, save that, refresh. Now we have a lot of data, as you can see in here. However, I want to scroll through this, but now I want to scroll with my mouse or mouse wheel. So that will be very interesting. So how to do that? Well, the first thing, of course, is we need to play around with the data that we're going to display. So if we're going to only display the first week data, what I'm going to do here is on the X scale, put a comma here. And then we're going to say here minimum value will be 0, which is basically showing index 0 of our data points here, which is the starting point. That's this one here. And just to make sure that you can see it, I'm going to give this a higher value. So we're going to say for Monday, this will be 50. Refresh it, there you are. So you can see this sticks out clearly. And then the end value will be also 50. So we know that, alright, apparently we are missing some value, but that doesn't matter. So it will know eventually, because we're going to measure here later on how many labels we have, because this is very important, and I will explain it later on. So we have that one, and we have here the max value, and the max value will be by default 6. So we're going to show just 1 week of data at a time. If I save this now and refresh, you can see here we're only seeing now the one was the 50, and then here and the Sunday. So now what I want to do is I want to scroll down here and I'm going to start to create the scroll functionality. And I guess I'll just put in some additional enters, it's just more comfortable to look at it. And then what I want to do here is, first of all, we're going to create a function, and this function is called the scroller or scroll. And then in here, we'll just do it like this, and then I'll do say console log. This console log will say scroll, meaning that if we're scrolling, and it recognizes it, we see this function or this console log being registered. So then what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have this item here, that it can recognize the scroll functionality. So the canvas, when we scroll on the canvas only, it should trigger. So we're going to say here, my chart dot canvas. And why are we doing this? Because we have my chart here, but the my chart is a chart object that consists of not only the ID name, but also the configuration, which leads to all of this data here above. So I don't want that. I only want to get this item here. To get this, the chart object, which Chartjs has built in here, has the canvas, and that's basically getting the ID name of that canvas, and that's it. So then what I have to do here is say dot add event listener. So basically I just want to create a event trigger or a listening ear, that when we do something, it will listen to it and then understands this triggers function, in our case, the scroll function. So then what I'm going to do here is the following. I'm going to say here, what is the event that should be triggered? And this is called the wheel. This is very important. You might say, isn't it not the scroll? No, the answer is no. Why? Scroll is basically moving this part here. I don't want that. I basically want to use my mouse or my mouse wheel to scroll up and down. So watch out, don't make that mistake, so you understand the difference. Comma. And then we say this is the event, we call it E, and then we want to trigger a function. So we will create here a function error expression. And what is the function name? Well, the function name is, well, let's call this a scroller. So it's better because we have here already scroll, so it avoids any issues. So it's a scroller. And then in our scroller here, what I want to do is I want to grab here two parameters eventually. First of all, I say the e value, which is basically the event. And secondly, we're going to say here my chart. And my chart is basically our item here, this entire chart. This will be very useful later on. So in here, I'm going to give these a proper name because these are what we call our arguments because they are the values. And then here we have the parameters, which is the reference of the argument. So we will call this E, let's give it a proper name. We can call it a scroll. So I'm going to call it scroll, but you know it's a mouse wheel scrolling effect. So then what I'm going to say here for my chart, I'll just name this chart. Alright, so now we have this. If I save this now, refresh, open up the developer tab, just let's refresh one more time. Alright, just ignore that one. And then I'm going to scroll here. As you can see here, look at that. It recognizes the movement nicely. And it recognizes, even if I do a long scroll, as you can see, it triggers multiple times. Why? It probably can read the rotation, the amount of rotation we make, like a percentage of that rotation. If it's a big rotation, it triggers multiple times. Just like if you have a big scroll, you will go down to the page. So that's very nice. So that would mean that we don't have to build any formulas for that. So that saves us a lot of time and complexities. So now we have this. What I want to do now is I want to just grab these here. And grab this, save, refresh. Alright, so now if I open up developer tab, do again, you can see here now we get some interesting information. So if I scroll up here, and it will probably depend. If you're on a Mac, if you scroll up, it goes up, and if you're on a Windows, you will probably, if you scroll down, it goes up. It's exactly the mouse movements are exactly the opposite. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What we need to know is the delta y, and the delta is basically what we call the difference in mathematics, and the y stands for the vertical level. Delta x stands for the difference on horizontal level. So basically, if you scroll, how much pixels the bar needs to go down, because you can see here, this is basically the pixels amount, if I'm not mistaken. So we have this here now, and basically if I go up, let's see here, we get here a positive value. If I go down, we get a negative value. So with this, we can now start to trigger and calculate if we want to move to the left and right. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead to the right side if I scroll up, and if I go scroll down, I should go back to the left side. So let's start to work on this. So for this, we're going to use the delta y and delta y positive and negative, whatever the value is in here. So what we're going to do now is the following. We're going to say here if, and then we're going to say here scroll dot delta y, and the delta y is a caps lock, capitalized letter. Alright, then we say the following. If this would be positive, as in 0 or above 0, in that case what I want to do here something. So what I'm going to do here is basically say we're going to increase this value here. So we want to update that. So what I'm going to say here is the following. I'm going to say then my chart dot, and I'm going to grab here. How do we grab this specific item? We go from my chart config to options, scales, X, and then min. So I'm going to say my chart, and I'm going to say config dot options dot scales dot X dot min, and then what we're going to say here plus equal 1. So we're going to increase it with 1 every single time we have the movement with our scroll. So that's very important. But of course, if we do this at the same time, I want to do as well for the min or max plus 1 as well. So you might say, why are we not going to use a shorthand here that you can say constant min equals that, and then it will do that? That doesn't work. So I tried that one. You would say, well, if I just do constant this over constant min equals that, for some reason that doesn't work because it just keeps the original value. Or even if I would do let here, it just doesn't want to get the dynamic value. So that's why I don't recommend you to do that. and that's why I'm not doing it as well. So if I save this now, we're not done yet, and I'm going to say enter. I'm going to say here my chart dot update. So I'm going to update the chart with the new adjustments. So if I save this, refresh, and now if I scroll up, as you can see here, how beautiful this is. If I keep on going, you will see eventually we have an issue. We're going too far, and then eventually we have the last value only. Of course, I want to have a block on this that we have at least 7 values at a time. So we should have like this at the end or at the very beginning. So what I'm going to do here now, of course, is we're going to do one more. First of all, I'm going to create a scroll here, but then in the negative, or at least going back. So I'm going to say, let's say here, else if, and then here, if the delta would be negative. And then, if that is the case, I'm going to say plus this here, but instead of plus, I'm going to say minus. Minus, so it's a negative. If I save this, let's see, scroll up, alright, scroll down. There we are. But of course, you can see here that doesn't work fully, so we have to solve that one. So what we're going to do here finally is, I'm going to say here else, if I else finally do nothing, this basically do nothing. And the reason why is that if it would be equal to 0, we just don't want to touch it at all. I guess it's already doing that here, but that's alright. I'm just having this here because we have an else if here. So now what I want to do is I want to make sure it is blocked, or at least when I go down, we should not only see one value eventually. So that will mean that we need to now increase the value here, or at least we have to create what we call a double check. And what this check does is very simple. It's not an if statement. I'm going to say if, and let's do it first for the lowest value. So if, and then we're going to say here, if the my chart scales, let's see here, well, what I'm going to do here, if the my chart scales dot x dot min, because we're going to work here in the negative, we'll make sure that this is min. If this is below or equal 0, in that case, what I'm going to do is a static data, because we already know what we want. So I'm going to copy this, put it in here, but then I'm going to only one more thing here. I will say this will be now static on 0, which is the beginning, and then finally here 6 as the max, which is basically our default setting here, as you can see. So we have this. And then else, if that is not the case, I can use this value here for the proper indentation. There we are. So now if I save this, refresh, if I scroll up, and then, oh, alright, so let me see, there's something not working. If the min is this or that, then we have this. Alright, let's check. Let's see, whatever. Oh yeah, of course. So why is it not working? Because we are now already on the lowest value, so it recognizes, sorry, we cannot go back more. That's why I was getting confused myself. So if I go ahead and back, you can see here, it blocks it now. Even if I keep on going down here, as you can see, it doesn't want to go lower. We see all the values. So now we have this one, and of course you figure out that you can just duplicate this entire structure. So I'm going to put it in here, except here, we have slightly different. So we're going to create here this if statement, and maybe what I will do is I'll just reduce this, remove that. So it will avoid confusion. We just start from scratch here. Alright, so what are we going to do here? We're going to say here, let's see, what we need to know is what we call the data length. And the length of the data will not be, and that's what I referred to when I was saying I will explain this part here, which is very important. Chart.js works with labels, and these labels here will show basically all of these items here. If we have more labels than values, then we can scroll through the very end and see all those empty value labels. However, if we have a lot, and that's why we don't see this 50. Let's go back here. Let's see if I go up. Yes, let's go to the end. This one here is just number 9. It's not 50. We expect a 50 eventually, but it doesn't show. And the reason why it doesn't show is it will only calculate how many labels we have. So we must have, if we have lesser labels than data, it will only show the labels that we have amount. If we have more data than labels, it will also follow the labels only. It will always follow the labels and never the data. So this is very important to understand. So we can only scroll as far as our labels go. If you know this, then we know how we can calculate what is the very last item here. So we're going to grab the labels as our array counting, or if we have the array length, we calculate from the labels and not from the data. Even though if there would be more here, I don't care, and Chart.js doesn't care as well, because it follows this one here. So now let's start to go look here. So we're going to create an if statement, and this if statement says the following. Alright, so we have the if statement here, and we say if, and in this case what we're going to do here, well, we can just grab this one here, or we look at the max value. If this max value would be larger or equal to what exactly the data length of the item. So I realize that we should have maybe here a constant. We call that data length, and this data length is basically the values in the labels. So let's grab that. So I'm going to say here, how do we get this? We say here my chart, and then dot config dot options. Sorry, not even that. I need the data length. So I'm going to say my chart dot data sets index 0. We only have one index in here, or the one data set, and then we say here, oh sorry, not even, we need only the labels. Sorry about that. So what I'm talking about is this. We go from my chart, let's do a visual so you can see it, from data to labels. I want to go in the data sets, but that's not allowed because we need to be in here, which is in the data. So then we have this, and we have this, and we say dot length. Alright, so once we have this, the data length, and let's spell this correctly, horrible. Copy this. Then I'm going to say here, if this max would be bigger than the data length, which would calculate the amount of labels we have, then in that case, what we need to do here is, alright, so what we're going to do here is say, we can just say, we can copy all of this. And then what I'm going to do here is, we're going to say data length. This will be equal to data length, because this is the minimum. And remember, we always want to see max 7 items. So data length minus, I guess, 6, or is it minus 7? It's one or the other, because data length is plus 1. But anyway, we try this first, see how it works. Then we should have 7 items here. If not, then we need to increase or decrease 1. Next, I'm going to say another one here. And the other one would be the data length itself, which is the last value. Alright, so then we have this, and then else, what we're going to do is, of course, this item here. If we're not surpassing to the very max limit, in that case, just increment plus 1. Alright, so now we have all of this here, and I guess we can do here a semicolon, maybe here semicolon or the ifs. Alright, although it looks like well, it looks quite messy, so let's remove that one. Save this, refresh. Let's see if we have now the expected item. Let's go to the very end. Let's see if we have 6 or 7 data points. Alright, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, you can see here we are missing 1 item. So I'm going to say here minus 7. And then if I scroll now to the very end, minus 7. Alright, so if I go back, we have here, alright, this is interesting. We get 1 here. Alright, let's do this. We say data length minus 6, and in this data length minus 1. That's probably the explanation why we had suddenly 8 items in here. So let's go all to the end. Alright. Then we have this. Then we have that. Alright. Alright, for now it doesn't matter, I guess. So maybe I'm just missing something. Or let's try that one more time. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So that's it. Alright, so I will figure it out eventually. However, most important part here is basically our scrolling effect that we can do here. So you can see here now it scrolls nicely to the left and the right. So now we have at least the scrolling effect. And if you want to say, well, besides the scrolling effect, it would make sense to have also buttons where you can click them on. Well, guess what? I have a specific video for that. In that case, I'm going to recommend you one of my favorite videos is how to create buttons that scroll the chart left and right in Chart.js. So those two together would make an absolutely phenomenal effect that is easy to follow for your viewers. I highly recommend you to explore this video as well.